folks. It's Sunday. I'm PH Red, and I'm happy to turn over to the queen of neurodivergency, Ms. Deanna Brakefield. Take it away, Deanna.
I've told you a million times, Fred, we got to talk about that title, sir. We got to talk about it. Yes, welcome to Neurodivergent News Live. It is another glorious Sunday. Although I don't know about you guys, but it is raining like cats and dogs where I am. Moments before we went live, our power actually blinked, and I wasn't even sure I was going to get back in time. So, yay, I'm here. We're going to have another great discussion today. Uh, so, um, I'm sorry, my husband just tried to distract me. We're waiting on him to rejoin the discussion. We're going to have another great discussion today. I'm Deanna Brakefield, your main host and advocate, parent, business owner, a major part of the community, and intend to grow larger. We will also have my husband, Jeremy Brakefield, with us, who I just mentioned is still trying to rejoin us on this call. We also have the amazing Stone with us. Stone, say hi to everybody and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Well, it is a gloriously sunny Monday morning here on the tropical Gold Coast in Australia. My name is Stone G. I am a counselor for neurodivergent people. Thank you.
Of course. And this week, we have another K Fred show host with us from another of the wonderful shows, Beautiful Minds and Beautiful Souls, the wonderful Tess Booker, emotional alignment coach, and wonderful at so many other things. Tess, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself from your side?
Yeah, I'm coming from San Diego, traveling back from the beach with my family, and I'm so blessed to just be here right now in this time. I am Tess Booker. I'm an emotional wellness coach, as she said. I host a show called Brilliant Minds and Beautiful Souls. I love uh, just really diving into emotional and spiritual well-being. I myself find that I'm have some of those neurodivergent tendencies, and I just love being here, um, being a part of this whole conversation of what it is to be with your people. And Deanna, this is just awesome. Thank you for having me here.
Of course. And so she prefaced it just a little bit. Today's show topic is one that I think is definitely close to or top of mind for a lot of us, and it's definitely close to my heart. Friendship and finding your people in this neurotypical world. How do we navigate relationships? I mean, so many of us have communication differences and just managing social energy engagements to begin with.
Good.
This isn't Leave It to Beaver, to use an old TV reference.
Yeah, I think, well, there's friendships are intensely significant and important and necessary. And aside from the anxiety that's associated with being rejected by someone, there's also the human need to connect. As humans, we are not able to live. And when I say live, I'm not being esoteric about that. We can't survive without contact. There is a scientist who did some work about, and he went into a cave for several months, and he came out and he said he didn't know who he was anymore. He had lost his mind. His own internal body clock had shut down and was not in alignment with external time. So we absolutely need friendships, and because of our differences, sometimes, at least in my practice, I'll work with clients who will be talking about having friendships, and they'll meet someone and they get really excited because it's a potential friendship, and when there isn't a match, they they can tend to fall apart. And so this is a very good topic about how to have friends, how to manage friends, how to deepen the connections with your friends, and how to have friendships that I'll use the esoteric term, feed the soul and cultivate longevity. So we're in the right spot today, and there is a formula for that, which we can, or framework, which we can go over.
Excellent. I love your frameworks. They're always so enlightening. Jeremy, first thoughts?
Well, for me, the whole friendship thing is a lot of like give and take. And so for me, with the neurodivergence, friendship is a great thing. And it's also for us, I feel like it's a dangerous area because for a lot of us, we don't really get the what's reasonable versus what's unreasonable. So if we have a friend that asks something of us, a lot of times we'll continue to just give and give and give and give beyond what is actually reasonable to our own detriment, to where the other person is essentially taking advantage of us. And for a lot of us, we let that happen. And then down the line, we look back and go, oh, that's what was actually going on. And so for me, I feel like that friendships are a great and wonderful thing, but I feel like because of our neurodivergence, we need to keep a little bit of a tighter eye on our friendships. Does that make any sense? Or is that just a way too skeptical?
It's a bit skeptical, but it sounds like what you're saying is we need to be very aware of the circumstances of our friendships and establish healthy boundaries. Would
Yes.
that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Tess, first thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna put a little bit of female energy into this space because when I love listening to this because my brain goes straight to Winnie the Pooh and that
Okay.
that land and that space that in that book and in those analogies and in those metaphors was a safe place where people can operate. And in my world, everyone was my best friend until they weren't. And I spent so much personally, me being a Tigger, being happy about life until I got hurt. And I would go pout and I'd go away because I didn't trust my friends. And then to come back and say, you're my best friend. So, yes, I think that like there is a space for neurodivergence to fit into they have to be safe in their world to be not rejected and to be loved and to be seen and to be heard. And without that community, I feel I was that Tigger that ran off. And if I didn't have a place to come back to, that's when everything became chronic and wanting to go off and be alone and be in a victim space of like, nobody understands me. I'll never be enough. And all that emotional behavior that was driving me because all I wanted was to belong. And so I relate to that, and what you guys are talking about of having the boundaries. You've got to have the good boundaries, but you got to have safe place for those boundaries to be with those people that relate.
Okay. I think I understand. We will come back to that. So Stone, initially you talked about some of these frameworks. And your framework is always so amazing. You always make it so simple. So please.
Well, I'll use an acrostic. This isn't really my work. This is something that I share with my clients. And the thing I like about frameworks is it gives you a criteria for anything that you're trying to do. For instance, a framework for being a parent is love. You don't have to figure out how to take care of your child because you love them. You intuitively do all the things that are necessary for your child to thrive. And so this framework is called Safe Harbor, and it emphasizes creating friendships that are, I'll just spell it out, supportive and understanding, authentic and accepting, focused and shared interest, enjoyable and low stress, honest and direct communication, allowing for direct communication, allowing for individual needs, reliable and consistent, balanced and mutually beneficial, ongoing and nurtured, and respectful of boundaries. So that spells out the acrostic of safe harbor. When we have criteria, and I'll just underscore this, we don't have to be surprised about what's happening or what's not happening in our life. We just look at our criteria, and that's a way that we can make decisions. That is also a way that we can expect results. For instance, my criteria for going to the grocery store is following a particular map. And when I get to the grocery store, I'm not surprised that I have arrived. So by having this particular framework, you know that you're going to have effective frameworks, effective friendships, and you're going to have a friendship that you can nurture for life, as well as something that's going to add value to the longevity of your life.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and point out the elephant in the room since we're 15 minutes into this conversation. But before I do that, I would remind anybody that's listening, they can dial in at 1-724-9-KPHRED and ask questions of our wonderful panelists. So the elephant in the room is there's kind of this belief that neurotypicals just naturally understand these frameworks. I would say that that is absolutely not true. They just navigate the bones of the framework a little easier than the average. There's no such thing as an average driven person, but than someone with our proclivities.
Well, yes, it's important for, okay, I'll make an I statement. If I am going to find a friend, then I would communicate with them my criteria for having a friendship, and I would share with them this safe harbor framework. Mm-hmm. And they can choose to accept or not accept. That criteria it also forms my boundary. And that's what happens when you're developing a friendship. And I do recognize that there is sometimes an urgency, or someone becomes quite thirsty about having a friend. But being with someone who is inappropriate for your values is only going to take away from your life experience.
So, Jeremy, any thoughts at this point?
For the most part, I completely agree with what Stone has to say. This is the first time I've heard of safe harbor, but with what I have heard, I like it. It's what it seems to me to be a good measuring stick, just based on the definitions of the words I heard, of a good way to go into friendships. Because for the most part, what I heard was whenever you go in, you set the expectations with your friend so that they know what to expect from you, and you can know what to expect from them. And I think that with neurodivergence, that's where we have a lot of our problems. I know, speaking for me, that's where I have a lot of my problems, is that a lot of the stuff are unspoken expectations, but you're supposed to understand those expectations, but nobody's ever said those expectations. And that drives me up the wall, because we're supposed to sit down and talk and come to an understanding of what you need and what I need. But there is like this whole set of criteria that's just you're just supposed to know. And nobody ever actually like quantifies it. And for me, that's one of my main issues, is not setting expectations, not understanding what is expected.
Okay, so I have to point out, this is the part of the conversation where we sound a little strange, because in the world outside of our world, hearing us talk about safe and quantifiable relationships has to sound absolutely alien.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Well, I have had hard knocks. I wish, where have you been, Stone, all my life? Because I wish I had somebody go through those safe harbors, but I have intuitively lived all those things you're talking about for my own, so that I could survive in my relationships, if that makes any sense. All those attributes, I've had hard knocks of life to teach me how to be in this world where I was misunderstood, not heard, not seen, and interesting is what people would say. She's interesting. And that was because I didn't have the
Uh-oh, I think she's breaking up just a little
give
bit.
to our, am I better? I didn't know how to articulate that, but that safe harbor is grounding and very refreshing.
Okay, so noted. Stone, am I allowed to share this framework
Yeah, of course.
social media posting for this episode?
Of course. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, then it sounds like this is something that could be really beneficial to a lot of people. So please continue.
Well, I think, not I think, friendships are similar to, can be similar to a nourishing meal or an effective relationship. You have a partner, or in neurodivergent world, there's polyamorous relationships. They're all different variations of relationships, and the ones that are effective have nailed safe harbor. So notice I'm talking about all relationships, and what underpins that is effective communication. And with effective communication, there's always an eagerness to share and be the embodiment of love for the other person. So we are listening eagerly for how we can be of service, for how we can nurture this person, for how we can support that person to be more of who they are. And because we have that eagerness, whether we're speaking or not, that person can feel that intensity, and it allows them to be more of what they are. Now, it's not enough to hold these things in. We need to discuss them. And the more we are discussing them, the more uncovers, the more we learn about one another. And again, it's necessary for longevity.
I fully agree with that. And when you are in that community that wants to learn to integrate those qualities, that grows on you. It becomes more practical. It becomes more tangible. It becomes an absolute when you have people that can have those conversations and freely be able to communicate where you are and where you want to go within that safe harbor. That makes so much sense, Stone.
I'll just point out this one other thing, and you hear me saying this all the time, that WHO statistic, driven people die 36 years earlier than everyone else. That's not going away, because we live in an allistic society. The only way that can be transformed is by creating our own communities where the homeostasis, the energetic field, is supporting longevity. So how could you do this? You could have your own family, extended family environment, where you have your grandparents, great-grandparents, uncles, aunts, all the cousins. Maybe there's about 50 of you living in a particular ecosystem. Or maybe you decide to collaborate with a group of other driven people, and you create a community. Or maybe you're entrepreneurial and you decide, hey, I'm going to create my own city, or my own town, or my own community, these types of things. And it can't just be virtual. It needs to be tactile. It has to be in person. So looking at this type of solution on a larger scale is what's going to turn that statistic on its head. And so when you look at blue zone communities, they have excuse me, they have this as a constant in their communities, and they do have autistic people in their communities, but those people are able to live for a longer period of time because of the deep purposeful connections.
So to pause right there, I think you just mentioned something that we have not brought up on this broadcast before. What is a Blue Zone community, sir?
Blue Zone is there are about 7 across the planet. Blue Zones are communities where the citizenry tend to live longer. There is a greater proportion of centenarians. And these centenarians are active. They're still gardening. They're still contributing to their community. They're not infirmed. They're still having sex. They're still doing all the things that anyone would do, and they tend to pass away in their sleep. They pass away because their body clock says, "Okay, we're done," and it's a peaceful experience.
Interesting. That's a new concept. I haven't heard that before.
I like that.
Okay, so you're saying that in these blue zones, that this framework, this safe harbor framework, is it naturally integrated, or is it something they've intentionally integrated?
It's part of their value system. So, and when I say it's part of their value system, it's actually part of their culture, and because it's part of their culture, it's embedded in their DNA.
Okay.
That's where it needs to be for us to have longevity. And just for clarification, longevity is not living long. It's having quality of life over a particular duration.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Okay, so Jeremy, I can see you nodding your head along to almost everything that Stone says today. That's a little different. What are you thinking?
Well, it was just most of what he's saying. It's things that I'm thinking or questions that I have, and so it's as he's talking. It's okay. That was the question I wanted answered. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, so we're talking about using this framework to begin to build those relationships. How can we seek to communicate better once those relationships are beginning to be established? Because I think that's really where we stereotypically fall down, is we come on too strong or we seem indifferent.
Yes, that goes back to when I was talking about how sometimes we can be really excited about the prospect of having a new friend, and we can bring a lot of expectation. Oh my gosh, I just met this new person. They da 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 da. And in that excitement, it can cause one to stop listening. And we absolutely need to listen more than what we're saying. And it's okay if you have something that you really want to share. You're not going to die if you can't share it in that minute. And let's say that ADHD is part of your identity. Write it down. Form a habit where you can carry a writing implement and something to write on, or use your phone and write down that really important thing that you thought you were going to die if you didn't share it. I promise you, there's no statistical evidence of anyone dying because they didn't get to say something or share something at the moment that it popped into their head.
That's interesting, Stone, because that's been the last probably 3 years of me learning how to talk less, listen more, and allow more, so that pause actually has trained my brain, rewired my brain to be even more empathetic and more effective in my relationships.
I think it's humorous that he mentions the writing the notes down thing, because none of you are privy to what Jeremy had to witness in the hour before this broadcast. as I let all of my anxious energy out in a wild stem. And on the wall over here, it's just covered in sticky notes that I organized and arranged, where I constantly have to write those things down so that they're out and not distracting the conversation.
Yeah, it's like brainstorming on paper, right? You're just getting all of it out so then you can let go. You can allow whatever because you don't have to keep revisiting until it gets noticed, if that makes any sense.
I mean, yeah. No,
Have you ever noticed what happens in your limbic system, or just in how settled you feel when someone stops and it is so apparent that they're taking in every single word that you're saying, that they're listening, they're absorbing, they're with you, they're present with you. It is one of the most powerful gifts, one of the most enriching activities that you can provide or give, that makes for effective relationships, for effective communication. I recommend it.
I think it's one of the things that defines our community, is that by our very nature, we almost demand that level of connection. We won't be satisfied with the passive, the surface compliments, or that's not the right word, the surface attachments that the neurotypical community tends towards, that they flourish on having many. No, we just want a few, and we want them to be really deep.
I'm laughing at that. There's this thing that Americans do in language where they will say, "Oh, I'm super excited," or "This is super great," or they put the super, and immediately I have to stop and say, "Why is it super? What else? Give me more information as to why it's that now, as opposed to what it was a few minutes ago. Did something change?" And then when I ask the question, there are all these blank looks, like, "Oh, okay, he's being autistic." No, I'm using language. I'm using words the way they're meant to be designed.
Okay, look, now this is the biggest argument.
Are you trying to say, sir, that words have definitions, that they actually mean something? Is that what I'm
etymology?
Oh,
They have an etymology, and each word has a frequency. And just because you use a word incorrectly does not mean.
So I can tell you, this is the main argument that Jeremy and I have had for the last 20 years is, I'm really excited and I'm just talking and I say something and I have to pick on that point right there. What did you actually mean?
Perfect.
because the thing for me is that I hear that word that's slightly off, and it's like, okay, she probably means this, or is she trying to tell me something else that I'm not picking up on? And that's for me, that's why linguistics for me is so important, because if I understand the words you're saying, then the mental thought that you are trying to convey to me, I can understand it and we can get on the same page. If every time you say something, I have to guess, is that actually what he meant, or did he mean this, or did they mean this other thing? And so for me, that's really, really important in communication, and 10 times as important in communication with autistics and neurodivergence. Because when you give us a dictionary and say, okay, here's the words that we've all agreed to use, and then down the line, you start going, oh, we changed this definition. We changed that definition. I just want to scream. I want to tear my hair out.
In a lot of my coaching, counseling, and the events that I facilitate, I stop people when they're using the word success or successful, because it's such a sloppy, incoherent word that lacks tangibility, measurable. It's not measurable.
Objective.
And exactly. And so I say, well, what do you mean by that? Do we have to stop and have a conversation about that? Or maybe you can just say, this was effective. And what is your measurement for effective? So much faster. And they get annoyed, but they know, okay, if I'm going to have this conversation with this person, I need to be responsible for my language because words matter. And this is a beautiful thing in friendships, in communication, in connecting with people, because the people that are in our sphere of influence, that are in our circle, because they want to love us more, and we're giving them information by the way that we allow them to treat us. We're giving them information, we're giving them a roadmap for the best way to love us. And language is such a wonderful way to do that.
So, how do we translate this into having more effective relationships? Because I think we can all agree that for us, quantity of relationships isn't the issue. It's having effective, nurturing relationships. And we're using a lot of definitive language in this conversation. And I think that is a bit important because, Tess, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. Emotions are extremely important, but they are also extremely difficult to articulate. And there's an assumed definition behind the words we choose to use that may not be accurate to what we actually felt.
Yeah. Yeah, there's criteria. Well, the first part of effective connections and relationships is criteria. I need to know who I am. I need to know what my internal so every human being has an internal secret story, and that secret story is running their entire life. Now, if I don't know what my secret story is, you're not interacting with me. You're interacting with my secret story, and we can call the secret story an unconscious voice, or we can call it the ego. And that's a really unpleasant entity to interact with, because it's a mask. It's not true. So that's the first part of it.
Tess, I think you
Say
would
that
call
again?
this the shadows that hijack your life.
Absolutely. And this is why I have that inner shadow assessment, to discover those voices and those stories. Because if you're interacting in this story of you and it's not the truth of who you are, you're actually either pushing people away or not drawing in the people that you desire, because you have this running story in your head. And when you're out of your alignments, you're not really attracting what you want. You're people pleasing, you're disappointed, you have frustration, you have more stress, and that gets expressed to the people in front of you, which is repelling. It's not stepping into that loving space where you are non-judgmental to yourself, but also providing space for other people to receive from as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
I definitely agree with that. And another interesting tidbit on I think you called it the shadow self, or I call it this
same idea, I think.
Yeah. So another interesting tidbit about the secret story that we hold is that it never goes away. Never, ever, ever, ever. The only thing we can do is become consciously aware of it. And one of the effective ways of acknowledging it so that you can transform it is having a community around you who sees you as the divine nature, the divine entity that you are.
Absolutely. Stone, you and I we have a lot in common in how we're directing people to own their stories, but not discount the things and the things that are there. You'll never get rid of it, but there's a place of accepting it within the divine.
Okay, guys, I'm not going to lie. I know exactly what you guys are talking about because Jeremy has given mine a name. I'm not going to he tells me to tell my mother to shut up.
Yep. That's the same thing we're talking about, Deanna. The stories, right? Or the people in those stories, or the narratives that are always there. They're criticizing and they're harsh, and it's that unconscious conscious battle that Stone's talking about. Yeah.
I love it.
It's cool. This is a cool, like, wrapped around really awesome conversation. I'm really like, wow, you guys. I understand.
Let me push us in a little bit of a different direction. Since we're talking about friendships, is there any advice that you would give to people in our neck of thinking, that whenever they think about trying to go out to meet people to try and begin those friendships, they have this massive anxiety that just builds up, that just going out and trying to talk to someone new, it brings so much that generally just trying to attempt to go out and talk to one person, it winds up leaving you feeling drained or something equivalent. Is there any advice that either one of y'all would have for those individuals?
Well, I would say go back to Stone's safe harbor and start learning some of those principles, because when you get your own self into that safe place, then others will feel safe too.
Yes. And so when you're talking about experiencing anxiety in a particular situation, there's an opportunity to ask questions about where is this coming from, and asking questions not as if the answer is the truth, but asking the questions as if you are an observer of yourself, and not being committed or not being taking a stand that answer is the all. It's more being.
Can I add to that, Stone? Maybe
Yes,
getting
please.
yourself in that, because it's getting yourself in an observation mode. Like, it's
Yes.
one thing to fail, and it's another thing to be a failure. So what I like to take people through is that happened. Who's talking to you, and what do you hear? Because you have to
Yes.
come from a place of observing what you heard, what happened, and how it's affecting you.
Exactly.
So from my
And
perspective,
and
Go ahead.
when you decide, well, it's this person that we're talking about, when they decide to acknowledge, these are some of the conversations that I'm noticing that is contributing to anxiety, then they can either change the story or they can change the environment. For instance,
Absolutely.
maybe they don't have to go to that particular event to meet people. Maybe they can meet someone online, or maybe they can meet someone in a different environment where they don't have that same story, so they can start building up, they can start conditioning themselves for having friendships, relationships, and connections that come from a different context.
It's
So I-
finding the place. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
I think it's finding the place where you can be comfortable, where you can take a little bit of pressure off, so that you're not so heightened in the fight or flight, and you move yourself into something really general. Like you said, change. Well, is there another way? What could be better than this? Like, you have to ask your brain those questions, because when you ask that question, you will find the answer, but the question is really important. So I like to say, what can be better than this? Because it brings
Yes.
you present to where you are now. You're looking for answers. You may not have them right away. You can take the pressure off of not having the answer right away and move into a place of less pressure, which you can. Where can you step into without that anxiety, right?
So in a very generalized way, it sounds like essentially what y'all are saying is using a logic loop to short circuit an emotional response.
Absolutely.
And
Good way
Yes.
to put. That's a great way to put it, Deanna.
Stone looks concerned about that definition.
No, I was looking at, because Jeremy, you brought up a good topic, or good adjunct to what we're discussing, because we haven't specifically discussed impact. And
Right.
it is our responsibility to cultivate nurturing connections and friendships in our life. It's not someone else's responsibility. It's our responsibility to create that container and invite people to come into that container. Now, when something happens where we either don't have criteria for, or we're in a situation where we choose, I'm using that very loosely because I don't want anyone to get upset, where we choose to become dysregulated. Remember, I'm very loosely using that word choose. Let's say, okay, so let's say that I'm in the United States and I don't know what 110 kilos is in pounds, but I'm 110 kilos and I'm 6'5" and I'm African American. And if I decide to become dysregulated in a public place, what's going to happen?
Right.
The police are being called and I'm going to be handcuffed or shot or both. So I'm being dramatic in that analogy just to underscore how important it is for us to understand the impact of our choices. And just because we are autistic, it does not mean that we get a get out of jail free card. We are always responsible for our behavior.
Yes.
So one thing that just to add to that, and being a words person, I find I like have to, because words bring about emotion, right? In my world. And I think in many people's, like a high achiever, when they hear the word responsibility, that's a really heavy word for some people. They carry this responsibility. I've learned to take that down a level and say, you have the ability to respond, which is much energetically a place of choice, a place of decisiveness, a place of paying attention to the impact, because it is a responsibility, but the responsibility isn't to drive you to stress and carrying something you shouldn't be carrying. The responsibility is your ability to respond.
Yes, I like that gentler.
Right. And that's my like words when a word is really harsh like that we have programmed ourselves to feel success, responsibility, like they're really vague, right? Like you said, I like to get to the essence of how does that make me feel, and then really dissect that word so that I can come up with something that has more empathy, more love attached, more trust, generosity, the roots of these words that we create, back to you guys saying why the words matter, is because of what we've attached to them in our cultures.
Yes.
Right.
It's interesting also that there's a juxtaposed, I guess, myth when it comes to driven people.
Exactly.
In that we either don't have empathy, don't have compassion, don't have feelings, or we have too much of it.
Absolutely. And I'm the one that had too much of it, too much, until I don't. Right now, I don't. Now I've learned to have those safe harbors that you put in place that I wish you were around 10 years ago. But the hard knocks of life, right, have gotten me here with purpose and passion and getting those emotions. That's why, hence the emotional wellness coach, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if we look at the data, look at the data, what's actually true is that all of us driven, we feel and experience emotions 40% more than neurotypical people. And
I put a number on it. There's actually a
40%. Yeah,
40%.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention is that humans only make decisions based on emotions. Now, there may
Absolutely.
be some of us who appear to only make logical decisions, but that
We're in
logic
denial.
is yes, that logic is connected to an emotion, and that emotion is what's driving.
Yes,
And
this
then
is hence the power behind emotions, and why I understand why neurodivergence it's a superpower, really, to be able to feel deeply and have momentum in your life, right?
yeah, I'm sure, Deanna, you might look at Jeremy and say, what's your problem? And he might say, oh, I didn't say anything. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Not in over a decade.
I've told her and anybody else that would listen for decades now
Okay.
that she is the only person I could be married to, because I am entirely too logical. Because I actually have to disagree with y'all on this, because for me, emotion is not what makes the decision. Emotion is what gets you where you want to go. Emotion is the gas in the tank. Because for me, it's a matter of the logic gives you the understanding to know whether the emotion is effective or not.
And that's why you're brilliant.
Because the thing is that for me, I look out at our world, and for me, the majority of what I see is that most people use their intellect to justify their emotions. They try to find a way to say, it's okay that I am feeling this way, I am acting this way because of this reason. For me, it should work the exact opposite. You should look at your emotion and go, okay, I am feeling this. Why am I feeling this? Is there a reason for me to be feeling this? Is this legitimate? Is this valid? Or is this something that my mind is putting on me? And this is just a psychosomatic reaction. And I need to take a step back, take a breath, and actually look at what this is doing to me mentally. And for me, when you put your emotion through that particular filter, to me, it generally it helps to me, because I know I explained this to Deanna a long time ago. Maybe I'm just, I don't know, maybe I'm special, whatever, I don't know. But there were years back where I would tell her that if I had an emotion and it did not actually make sense, that once I realized that, the emotion stopped. She never believed it until she saw it in action at one point. And the reason I bring this up is because
that's what I meant earlier when I said a logic loop short circuits the emotional response.
The emotional response is the place where it tells you, ding, 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 I am out of alignment. When you feel terrible, it's because you're not tapped in and tuned in to the things that emotion is trying to address. If you ignore those emotions, you're now stuck in that loop.
Okay, so let's take it back a little bit. We'll go back to the brain 101 for what we all know. Just a little is that we take in 2.6 billion bits of content per second, and a lot of our emotional feelings body, the emotional body is in our stomach. That's where we produce a lot of serotonin, and we can't actually process that 2.6 billion bits of information, which is why we categorize, why we chunk things.
Exactly.
And the chunking enables us to have a reference point to say, okay, I've experienced this before. What was my response? What's the safe thing to do? So we check in with how we feel, and this is all instant. And then our cognitive brain says, oh yeah, I want to weigh in now. I get to have a say. And then the cognitive brain says, we can proceed. So that's a long way around of describing what happens for you, Jeremy, and to differing degrees, people will be stronger in one area or another.
Or the other. That was a great
And
description, Stone.
thank you.
Okay, so we are almost at the top of the hour, so I would love to give everybody the opportunity to take a couple of minutes and have some last thoughts on our topic, because I think this has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation so far. So, Stone, would you like to start us off?
Yes. Well, I feel like those toys that we had when we were kids, the ones where you pull the string and it says the same thing over and over again. And for me, that is have criteria, have frameworks. When you have criteria and frameworks, then you can condition yourself in that criteria and the framework, and that conditioning builds character, it builds integrity. And integrity, it's not keeping your word, it's honoring your word. When we have integrity, everything in our life flourishes, especially connection, especially communication and relationships.
Very nicely said. Jeremy?
Friendships are great and wonderful, and we all need to have more of them. So go out and make more friendships. Just make sure you set your expectations first.
Okay. Miss Tess?
Yeah, I would say that start today by building that trust within yourself. If you want to be trustworthy, then start building that trust with yourself. Do what you say you're going to do. Go do that. And then watch how you build that trust with yourself, and then how others will respond to trusting you. And your communities will continue to grow as you grow in your own trustworthiness, and creating a safe space for your will create the safe space for everybody else, I guess.
Anybody correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of what I'm hearing is communicate very, very honestly and bluntly with yourself about what you're feeling and what your intentions are. And then communicate a little softer with the people that you want to form those relationships with, so you don't bowl them over and ease them into it. Is that what I'm hearing? Or did I go too far into the humorous side of things with that statement?
I think it's useful to distill topics so that people can action them. Because what's the point, right? Someone is listening to this podcast and they're listening to it. Maybe they're tuning in because, Deanna, they really love the tenor, they really love the quality of your voice. Well, that's wonderful. But how is that adding value to their life?
Right.
So the distillation, that's useful. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation. If Fred doesn't disagree with us, I think we are just about out of time. But next week we will be here same time, 5 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. Pacific. What time are we where you are again, Stone?
It is 07:45 that we start in Australia, in Brisbane.
Okay.
Brisbane time.
So next week, we will be in your local times on Sunday/Monday, and we will be talking about neurodivergent parenting. What's it like to parent when you have a neurodivergence, especially when parenting a neurodivergent child that may be different than you? So I think we're going to be able to blow that one up just a little bit. And I think we are going to have a wonderful time like we always do. So, same time, same place, same crazy space next week.
Thank you, Deanna.
Thank you, Deanna. Bye.